Well, I'm not really sure how to start this review, because even though I saw this at a movie theater, it's not technically a movie. What this actually is more like the filmed version production of Hamilton that you can watch on Disney Plus. It's a professionally recorded version of a Broadway performance, rather than an actual movie. Because of that, it has to be looked at somewhat differently from an actual movie. In a movie, the filmmakers could use elaborate sets, location shooting, CGI, and other visual effects to show us the underworld and the various supernatural elements of the story. But it's a stage production, so much more is left to the audience's imagination. The sets and effects are there to suggest a location or idea rather than completely recreate it. And that isn't necessarily a bad thing, it's simply a very different medium, and it took me a little while to figure out what I was watching. You have to accept that you're essentially sitting in the audience of a Broadway theater, just with better camera angles and cheaper tickets. In a better seat, obviously, better close ups. The main idea behind Hadestown is certainly interesting. It combines two Greek myths, the relationship between Hades and Persephone, and the tragedy of Orpheus and Eurydice, and reimagines them through a world inspired by 1920s and Depression-era New Orleans. Instead of presenting the underworld as the traditional dark cavern filled with flames and mythical monsters, it becomes a smoky industrial world filled with workers, machinery, jazz, and blues music. That combination gives the production a very distinctive personality. Even when the plot itself is familiar, the presentation makes it feel different from most other adaptations of Greek mythology. It's a creative gimmick, and it's a gimmick that mostly works. The music is one of the strongest parts of the production. The jazz, folk, and blues-inspired soundtrack fit the setting extremely well, and there are several genuinely catchy songs. Some of the music has a fun, energetic rhythm, while other songs have a darker and more mournful quality that fits the tragic nature of the story. Because this is almost told entirely through music, the songs are responsible for doing most of the storytelling. There isn't a lot of traditional spoken dialogue, so whether or not the production works for you will probably depend heavily on how much you enjoy the musical style. I thought the music was memorable enough to carry the production, though there are moments where I wish the story would slow down and give the characters more opportunities to simply interact with one another. The performances are great all around. Everyone fully commits to the unusual world and style of the production, and the cast members all have powerful voices. Even when the characters are not given a huge amount of development, the actors bring a lot of emotion and personality to their performances. Patrick Page is especially entertaining as Hades. His incredibly deep voice immediately makes the character feel intimidating and larger than life. At times, he felt very reminiscent of Oogie Boogie from The Nightmare Before Christmas, particularly when he's leaning into the more theatrical and villainous side of the character. However, Hades isn't presented as a completely one-dimensional villain. There are moments when he appears tormented, lonely, or insecure, especially in his relationship with Persephone. He wants control over everything around him, but underneath that control is also a fear of losing what he has. Patrick Page makes Hades fun to watch while still giving him a little more emotional complexity than I was expecting. The relationship between Hades and Persephone is probably one of the most interesting parts of the story. They clearly still care about each other, but their marriage has deteriorated over time. Persephone resents being trapped in the underworld so much that for so much of the year, while Hades has become increasingly controlling and obsessed with manipulating the world he's built. Their relationship acts as a darker parallel to Orpheus and Eurydice. Orpheus and Eurydice represent a younger and more hopeful kind of love, while Hades and Persephone show what can happen when love becomes damaged by mistrust, control, and resentment. That comparison gives the story more thematic depth, even though I still think the individual characters could have been developed further. That brings me to my biggest criticism, although it may admittedly be more of a nitpick. There just isn't a tremendous amount of character development, particularly for Orpheus and Eurydice. I understand that the production is following the basic structure of the original myth, and Greek mythology does not always give its characters the same kind of detailed development that we expect from modern stories. However, there is a significant point between the first and second acts when Orpheus travels to the underworld in order to rescue Eurydice, and we don't really get to see much of that journey. I think showing more of that journey could have added a lot to the story. We could have seen Orpheus struggle with fear, doubt, exhaustion, and temptation as he descended into Hadestown. It could have made his determination to save Eurydice feel more powerful and helped us understand how the journey affected him. Instead, the story moves relatively quickly from one major event to another. We understand that Orpheus loves Eurydice and wants to save her, but I never felt as emotionally connected to their relationship as I probably should have. Considering that their romance is supposed to be the emotional core of the tragedy, I wanted a little more time with them as people. The same is true of Eurydice's decision to go to Hadestown. Her reasoning makes sense within the story, especially because she's desperate, hungry, and searching for security. Still, the production could have spent more time developing her internal struggle. A few additional scenes or conversations might have made her choices feel even more tragic. That said, I don't really have any particularly major criticisms. I had a pretty fun time watching this. I can understand why the stage production has such a devoted fan base. The music is catchy, the performances are excellent, and the combination of Greek mythology with Depression-era jazz and industrial imagery gives the production a style of its own. However, I'm not convinced that seeing a filmed version in a movie theater is essential. Unless you're a die-hard theater fan who always wanted to see a production of Hadestown and now finally has the opportunity, I don't think the theatrical presentation really justifies the extra expense. There wasn't anything about watching it on a movie screen that dramatically enhanced the experience for me. The production itself was obviously designed to be viewed in a live theater, where you are physically in the same room as the actors and can feel the energy of the audience around you. A movie theater screening of a recording exists in this strange middle ground. You aren't experiencing it live, but you also don't receive the expanded visuals or cinematic scope of an actual movie adaptation. I think I would have gotten almost exactly the same experience watching it at home on streaming. Because of that, my recommendation would be to wait until it becomes available to stream unless you're already a major fan of the musical, or simply love seeing theatrical productions on a big screen. The production also technically does not have a traditional movie age rating, but it is surprisingly clean. There's no strong language, graphic violence, or anything overly raunchy. There are just some mature themes about death, poverty, unhealthy relationships, and a few characters drinking, because it was the 20s after all, but nothing is presented in an especially graphic way. It's a very light PG-13, and even that's mostly just because of the darker themes rather than any specific objectionable content. Compared to a lot of modern musicals, it's pretty restrained. Overall, Hadestown is enjoyable, creative, and extremely well performed. It takes familiar Greek myths and gives them a unique musical identity through its mixture of jazz, blues, folk music, and Depression-era imagery. At the same time, the unusual setting is also a large part of the appeal. Once you get beyond the concept of Greek mythology presented through the style of 1920s New Orleans jazz, the actual plot and characters are not especially deep. The story works more as a tragic fable than as a detailed character study. Still, the music and performances make it worth watching. If the idea of seeing Greek mythology reimagined as a smoky jazz musical sounds appealing to you, you'll probably have a good time. Just know that the filmed version doesn't necessarily need to be seen in a movie theater, and the production style is ultimately more memorable than its character development, or rather, lack thereof. So for me, it gets a B, an 8 out of 10, and 4 out of 5 stars. If you know what you're getting into, it's enjoyable, but wait to stream it.